And we live. Welcome, Paul. Welcome to the booth. Thank you for coming on the show. For whoever is listening today, this is day two of Upsec Phoenix and Black Hat. We have the good host, Paul Harragane, on the booth today to chat a little bit about leadership. Paul, before we kick off the fireside chat, and we have nice warm fire in this very cold day, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell a little bit more about you.
Sure. So I lead information security and cyber defense across a global portfolio run by an American private equity company called KKR.
Right.
I've been at the firm for about 9 months, so I'm relatively new to the position. Before that, I was a partner at EY, and I've led several kind of security leadership positions in consulting over 20 plus years, I think.
How did you find the transition from traditional EY consultancy, traditional into the other side of the table?
I mean, I consider myself a bit of a hybrid. I've always been a technical engineer throughout the beginning part of my career, and then I wanted to start making some serious money. So, what's the point otherwise? And got into investments and private equity from there. So I think in order to succeed in that level,
right,
and then in that world, you need to be a hybrid of businessman and security engineer. So not a traditional path. There's nothing really in university that teaches you both ways. So it's very much an on-the-job learning experience. But it's been good to me. I've been very lucky, I think, in my appointments. Right time, right place is half the battle, and just a good network. And I think that's often the reason for good positioning in new jobs.
Fantastic. And in leadership position, I mean, you interact with a lot of companies all the time, especially new company coming into market. What have you seen in terms of transition, new generation versus old generation? How they are different in terms of leadership, in terms of security leadership, especially?
So this is a question I get asked a lot. So just for transparency for the audience, I kind of sit on around 175 boards. I don't actually participate in the board, but I advise them on security initiatives. And often we think of kind of having a board representation from a security perspective is all about bringing awareness to the board and kind of raising capital for new initiatives and helping security teams. But a lot of the time I'm sitting there explaining to the boards and answering questions around, is the security practice efficient? Is the CISO a good CISO? Are they fit for purpose for our operating model? And because half the time they don't fit the boardroom. And that's an interesting shift in what we're seeing, because as time goes on and technology moves on, we're seeing Generation X leaders, I'm going to say plus 35, maybe plus 40, who are traditionally mainframe network security led engineers, retire, move on, or move on to pastures new. And then the new wave of security leadership, which quite frankly, the youth aspire to, being software driven and being Gen Z, right? So SD-WAN, kind of infrastructure as code, is the new way businesses work.
Right.
Maybe not the large conglomerates of the world, but the startups and the fast moving businesses are all youthful and straight out of university graduates. They want to work at exciting businesses, and no one's working on iSeries anymore. Let's be real. AS400s if they're still on your network, you need to sort that out. But everyone's using Ansible, Terraform, in a way to create an elastic environment. But protecting that environment is super difficult.
Right.
So how do you get a leader who understands risk as a priority versus speed as a priority?
Right.
And boards are sitting around going, I don't understand my true risk. I'm getting information from all different sources saying lock down the perimeter. It's traditional basic risk advice, which is vanilla, right? Unfortunately, it's vanilla, right? And we're having to re-educate boards to say, look, your business is shifting to a new paradigm. It's evolving rapidly, and you need to consider new age leadership when it comes to security. So how do you teach youthful, hoodie wearing, I mean, look, it's so stereotypical, but hoodie wearing, against the world kind of figureheads, which typically some of the best leaders are that, to get them to be boardroom ready.
Right. And do you think it's a convergence between, the new leadership into being board ready and the opposite to be new boards or existing board to be new leadership style ready? Or it's just security need to talk risk, need to talk quantification, and that's about it?
So risk quantification is another subject and quite a big one. Okay. But to answer the first part of your question, I think it's an education platform for boards to understand that they've got to evolve.
Right.
If you look at businesses that do incredibly well, incredibly fast, they are pretty much running new technology, new initiatives, tend to be software driven,
Right.
and understanding that risk profile for the business is a huge factor for boards, because it's the reputation of the business which hits the EBITDA model, right? Which is how you evaluate company worth and value, and that's what boardroom and boards and investors care about. So, reputational damage, all those kind of things need to be put into a mixing pot and spat out against an appetite which needs to be offset against what the new age leader says, which is quite difficult to sometimes comprehend. Like, for example, stress testing code dynamically, I think we all agree, is a pretty valuable thing, right? Boards just haven't got a clue, right? Traditional boards, should I say, right? So
why should I spend the money in doing that exercise when I can spend money maybe marketing, go to market? It's I think right now we're seeing the shift between spending a little bit more relaxed and questioning every single penny that organizations are spending. And in my opinion, I've seen the role of the CISO to be much more justifying and protecting certain activity, also the engineering community. And they need to do that at board level, because that's what the money spent is being decided. So how do we enable Gen Z to talk risk and quantification versus I have problems that looks good to solve versus I actually need this problem because it's going to reduce the organizational risk, the organizational exposure, or it's give us more chance to actually do business in other areas.
Yeah. I think that we need to transform traditional frameworks to actually understand quantifiable intrinsic risk, not just this is a security foundational practice that we need to follow. So what would the impact of, say, not having full control of your network or full identity of your network as an intrinsic risk metrics? That's quite a difficult thing, because it's not something you can just put out there and expect every company to easily achieve. It's all got to be kind of qualified against your own operating model and your geographical span. But I think that the message we need to give boards to educate them a bit better is, what does a non-negligent position look like, right? Because for my companies that I kind of oversee, I know that security will never be fully, complete. Right? It's an ongoing transition. I don't ever want to use the term best in class, because that's subjective. No one really knows what that means. What does good look like? That's again another term that no one really can define. But instead, think of it in a case of, what do I need to do to prove, if an event were to occur, to turn around to the board and say, look, we're not negligent. We cover X, Y, Z as best we can. We're firefighters. That doesn't mean, we have a great fire brigade in the UK. It doesn't mean that we stop all the fires from starting. Fires will start, and we just need to be best prepared to put them out. And if you can be in that prepared state, and a state that you can be comfortable with, you can qualify your risk acceptance criteria to your board in a way to say, look, we recognize that we've got some gaps, but from a position of comfort, I can sleep tonight, because we're not negligent. We're covering the basics. We're strength. The defense in depth is a concept of continual progress, right? So we need to consider not just application security, but all the security domains. I mean, they're all valid, right? But I would say, as we move into 2023 and beyond, the application surface is becoming more and more prevalent, because we're expecting more and more from our selling tools.
Everything is becoming software. Everything is becoming faster. So doing risk assessment and quantification on a piece of paper, on a sheet, on a model, on a Excel spreadsheet. Sorry for my shiva.
Look,
It's not anymore today.
I mean, look, traditionally, in my OffSec days, I would have focused on two things to gain access. It would have been, I would have targeted a specific user, and I would have then, once penetrated a user, I would have looked for vulnerable operating systems in the network and tried laterally move that way, right? To abuse the trust mechanism within AD. Nowadays,
well,
it's still valid, and I
it's
get
a minor thing.
But now that that used to be my main priority to protect that. But now I look at the attack surface and I think, crikey, we've got some pretty sophisticated web apps going on.
Yeah.
It's all internet exposed. It's completely testable from the outside with no real protection against.
Nice.
So, like AppSec Phoenix, like it worked. I'm trying, but like bug bounties and kind of dynamic testing in the just secrets management, like all those kind of things are so important in today's world.
And it's impossible.
How far does the budget go? I mean, like you've got to prioritize.
No, exactly. It's focus nowadays, and it's, if you look at individual problems, you get completely lost in a sea of problems, because right now we have, I think the technology stack that have changed in the last 2-3 years, the speed of change have dramatically increased, and now we have security team from the traditional world and maybe some of the new world that need to look at 400 different alerts and are completely lost.
Yeah.
And trying to solve a new problem with old methods doesn't really work, right?
My advice to boardrooms, if any boardrooms are listening, is to try and get some kind of youthful perspectives into the boardroom, try and innovate the boardroom, and try and. So the reason why I bring that up is because often a boardroom will only look at value creation propositions.
Right.
So they will look at trying to grow their values based on a load of calculations. Whilst I see security maybe not as a value creation proposition, because it's not. It is a preservation proposition.
Exactly.
Okay, so it depends how you want to view it. But I've been involved in a lot of sell-side activity, and no one's ever come to me and said, this business is amazing, I'm buying it for their security posture. But what I have seen is when you have a negligent security posture, I've seen the EBITDA model drop, because investors want to understand that you have all the bases covered and not big, programs awaiting their investment to fix a hole. The investment is there to scale growth, right, and not fix problems. So, but half the time they do, right? So,
I mean, a lot of the time you're selling a business, you actually have to assess where you are, and you have to fix problem. But if the problem are too big, it might scare off your buyer, your investor.
I mean, it probably doesn't scare them off, but it definitely makes the process more competitive from their standpoint.
Right.
Because they have negotiation tactics. A bit like when you're buying a house. You buy a house and you see it's got crummy windows, you're going to want the windows replaced before you buy it, right?
Or a lower price.
Or you bake that into the calculation. Right. Yeah. So having a youthful perspective on the board actually gives a really varied proposition, because it considers the Gen Z profile.
And on that subject, that's a really great subject. Would you advise maybe getting some net, non-executive advice, or cybersecurity net from the youth perspective to help them on both sides getting board ready, but also helping the board getting a new perspective?
Yeah, and I think NEDs are fantastic for that. Ideally, you would be invested, because then you're accountable for your own money. But and you'll be surprised how people think when their own money's at stake. But no, if you can gain
free, but then when your money's at stake.
No, I know, I appreciate it. Look, for me, the right answer is yes. Okay, if the more perspectives you can get, the more informed you're going to be. And if you run a traditionally mature board, who are focused purely on raising capital and and giving good dividends to their shareholders, I think that youthful perspective is very, very important, especially from the security community. It shouldn't just be from the security community; it should be tech enabled, because that's where we're driving our businesses.
But we're security people, and
I know, I fully appreciate it. So
people,
for this audience, yes, if you can offer your services, like it's a great way to break into leadership, to prove to new roles that you would be going for. To say that you've held NED positions, like it's a really strong offering, I think personally. So yeah, if you can get onto one, definitely try for it.
How would you, as a young leader, how would you get involved, for example, in a board or a network that has that kind of level? Because it's not easy to get,
Yeah, and it's getting tougher because as security gets into a wider subject matter,
Right.
the domains are becoming more sparse and more segregated from each other. Like you very rarely see a file in application security engineering in today's world, but back when I was learning, it was all your job. Yeah, it was all your job. So, I mean, I consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none, and that's probably led me to being able to advise across the entire domain of information security and cyber defense. For the new age, it's going to be tougher, unfortunately, because in order to get into good jobs, you have to specialize now. You very rarely come out of a university, first time, second time job and understand everything. And that's going to be more of a challenge. But I think if you've got the availability in kind of doing some pro bono, charity-based, advisory board work, well then jump on that, because that experience goes a long way. For someone who recruits an awful lot of CISOs, and I say that because I've recruited over 10 in the last year, all for different jobs, not for the same role. I really value that experience.
That would have made a really bad.
Yeah, I know. It happens, I'm sure. But no. I mean, that experience will go an awful long way.
Brilliant. Paul, in order to conclude the conversation, for new leaders, what will be the top 3 advice to get ready for the new century, for the new kind of evolution, and then maybe one advice for the board to actually get ready for the new generation?
Yeah, so once you've established yourself in a business, you will probably specialize. Maybe you're a SOC analyst, maybe you're an AppSec engineer. Start to think about how business risk is really impacted by what you do, because inevitably security professionals are there just to create a safe environment for business operations to effectively run. And it's the profiteering and the revenue that actually business leaders really like the sound of. Whilst they probably are very happy that you've crushed a load of alerts, like it's not making money, right? Like it goes back to that preservation value. So if you can be a true enabler in a business, and get that visibility within your teams as you go up and down, up the food chain within an organization, get more exposure to the board, because the board are the ones inevitably who are driving the business, making the key decisions. And for me, that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in as many top seats as I could be, directing, rather than just firefighting all the time. So I guess my advice is to try and learn how businesses work alongside your day job, which I know is incredibly difficult in this rapidly evolving. The terminology is very, very important. So alongside, I mean, if you're a true enthusiast into business, I know people like to take multiple degrees whilst running alongside their security jobs. Do a business degree.
But there is also the cyber executive and non-executive advisor board, the net from the financial.
But you're not going to be accepted unless you can provide valued calculations on risk qualification, right? So that comes with experience. Like I don't think you can learn that out of a textbook.
No.
Don't rush it. Like it will happen. Like I know everyone wants to get to the top seat really, really fast.
You don't want to get burned in that process.
Well, the tenureship of CISOs in today's world is not good, right? So, and whilst the market's incredibly lucrative, you can jump out of one into another. You don't want to get a bad rep for being turned over quite a lot, right? So, and advice for boards is get educated, right? And that's a tough message to deliver.
Yeah.
And it really is. And it's a tough education piece for them. Why should they care?
Well, if the security people talk risk, it's kind of, I always say, meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Security people talk more risk and quantification to get more reputable to a board, and the board needs to understand, well, if I need to get into the weeds of, okay, maybe how we solve this risk versus these other risks, maybe getting a little bit aware about cloud security, application security, at least the category, the broad category, so at least you can have an opinion. Yeah, maybe this year we invest in a program on application security, maybe in a year we invest in a cloud security program and we reduce our exposure of this level.
I mean, one thing I'd like to leave on, now you've just said that, it's kind of opened my mind into something new. If you do get the opportunity to get to that level and present at the board, go prepared, right? Go prepared for the so what, because you're going to probably present, we've got this threat, we need some money. The board are going to turn around and say, that's great, but what does it mean if it goes wrong? How do I know you're doing a good job? How are you going to measure success?
Right.
So those measurements are paramount, right, in determining that you're doing a good job, which gives them confidence that they've invested well in you.
And if you panic or if you don't know the answer,
don't panic.
And it's valid, I think.
Just simply say, I don't know the answer to that right now, but it'll be my job to come back to you today on that.
And it builds trust. I think the message for the board is building trust on two ways. Because if you scare a board, then you lose trust, confidence, and a job very quickly.
It's the one crowd you don't want to displease, right? So let's just, it's career limiting if it goes wrong. So go prepared is the right answer.
Brilliant. Yep. Paul, thank you very much. If people want to listen more of what you say, conference, so where they can find you, where they can follow you.
I mean, typically, I've reduced my overall kind of social presence because of what I do. I think it was sensible to do that. I tend to speak at a lot of private equity events now, so maybe not so much back in kind of like the Arsenal days back when I was a coder. But I mean, you can add me on LinkedIn for sure, and I will definitely give you my point of view on there. I don't have a Twitter profile anymore. Just because it's too dangerous, because an opinion can go the wrong way on Twitter. So,
your opinion involves shares and share price.
It does involve share price. So, I mean, I write a fair amount of white papers. So, just Google private equity, cyber. I'm sure something will come up.
Paul,
thanks for having me.
Much.
Cheers. Appreciate it. Thanks for the coffee.
AppSec Phoenix. Fix vulnerabilities today before attackers exploit them tomorrow.